Good afternoon, young people. So, today what we're going to talk about real quickly, because I don't want it to rain on my equipment or my son's equipment, you know what I'm saying, is how active reading and codes can be used by you as strategies to do what we call critical analysis and develop your thinking skills overall. Next slide, please. All right, so active reading. Well, I've been saying this since August, and I've been saying it, for every year that I've been teaching. You got to have something to read. You got to have something to write with. You got to have something to write on. Okay? You got to annotate. You're taking notes on everything that the author is putting in front of you. Everything. Not just like one or two things. Everything. The who, the what, the where, the when. All that stuff. If you're talking about literature, you're talking about setting and characterization, and you're talking about, the figurative language, all that other stuff, okay? You also want to relate to what you're reading. That makes it more personal for you. It makes it more useful for you. Even if you have to come up with some silly reason, I'm going to get a grade, I guess I better do this. If that's all that it takes to get you started, then hopefully you'll figure out more and more reasons to care about literature, right? So, you got to do some evaluation. What is all this worth? You know what I mean? Next slide, please. All right, so critical analysis, it's a phrase and it's made up of two words. So let's go ahead and look at what those words mean. Critical analysis, merits and faults of a work. Okay. Incorporating a detailed and scholarly analysis and commentary. I like that one a lot. I like this definition a lot. And I like this one too. I like all of these. If you understand this part of what it means to be critical, then you're halfway there. Next slide, please. All right, so now analysis. Well, that's easy. You're breaking the whole thing down into its constituent elements. So if you were to critically analyze a pizza, so to speak, you'd start off with probably the crust. Then you talk about the tomato paste, the sauce. Then you talk about the various toppings, and you talk about the cheese and the mushrooms and all that other crap, right? That's what we're talking about when we look at the elements of a thing, right? So, you can read the rest later on. All right, now, here's some stuff I made up. You guys, you may or may not understand that I kind of dig acronyms every once in a while. Okay, and this acronym simply stands for curiosity, observation, documentation, evaluation, and synthesis. Bug. All right, so curiosity is probably the most important aspect of this whole strategy. You have to care. You have to wonder what this person is trying to say to you, why they're trying to say it, how they're trying to say it. You gotta care. You gotta, break out of your own little bubble and see different perspectives. Okay? Observation. One of the things that made me the kind of, person I am today, at least as far as teaching and how I go about examining literature and stuff like that, and not just literature, anything that anybody says ever, I'm doing a critical analysis of it. Okay? Like right now, I'm critical of that daggum truck noise. But anyway, so I just got out of the Army, and I was back in school at UNF. I came across a professor. I ended up taking a class of his. His name was Dr. Samuel Kimball. All right? The impact that man and his way of teaching had on me, I cannot properly quantify it. You know what I'm saying? And it was really elegant what he did, because basically he just implored his students to observe what was going on in the texts. And when you do that, when you take a very step-by-step methodical approach to looking at what an author puts in front of you, you start to see all kind of different things come together. Okay? Documentation. If you're not taking notes, then you're wasting your time if you do any of these other processes. You got to have your notes to keep your ideas in line and what you want to do eventually with this information that you process. The evaluation. Yeah, again, what is the value of this? How can I use it? All right. And then the synthesis. Well, you've got all of this stuff. You've read the text. You've got your notes. You've been curious. You've documented. You've got some sort of evaluation going on, and your synthesis is bringing all that different stuff together and figuring out what to keep, what to kind of put off to the side, and then you go at composing your essay. Okay, so let's try this real quick with one of my favorite poems or poets, and it's actually one of my favorite poems too. William Blake was a dude from England. 18th century.
Early 19th.
Okay. Yeah, so 1800s then, right? Okay, so anyway, he had a pretty interesting perspective, and if you care about it, you can explore more and you can find out more. That actually brings me to one of the things that you guys need to work on. I'm not necessarily smarter than you all, but I do know a whole lot more than you. What we call it in the profession of education, we call that the schemata. These are things that you already know, that knowledge you've acquired and information that you've come to own, that you can connect to other things. Okay, so you guys don't have very much schemata. That's why it's kind of imperative that you do as much reading and as much figuring out of information as possible. You got to get more. Stack that info, yo. All right, so click on this link. Takes us to this file. Eventually. Do what it says. All right. Never mind. You click on the link and it should be able to be fine for you, okay? Here it is. This is what it should look like. If you guys have any problems, well, I imagine you'll be able to, how to get a hold of me, all right? So, comments here all over the place. But first, let's do a dry reading of the poem, okay? The Garden of Love by William Blake. I went to the Garden of Love and saw what I never had seen. A chapel was built in the midst where I used to play on the green. And the gates of this chapel were shut, and thou shalt not writ over the door. So I turned to the garden of love that so many sweet flowers bore. And I saw was filled with graves and tombstones where flowers should be, and priests in black gowns were walking their rounds and binding with briars my joys and desires. Heavy. All right. Now, there are going to be some religious overtones and commentary in this poem, right? Just like in a lot of poems, okay? But let me do my regular old disclaimer, okay? I'm not trying to go take you to church here or anything like that, but you have to recognize that the Bible is the most influential book in Western civilization, all right? And by not being able to recognize some of the different references or allusions to that, you're missing out on an awful lot of stuff, okay? I imagine most of us wonder where we're gonna go when we die or why we're here in the first place. So that's why knowing some of the different ideas around that topic is kind of important and helpful, right? Because, who does not want some sort of peace in their lives? So, that said and out of the way, let's look at some of our comments. We'll start off here at the title. And that's where you should start every place. Okay? Ooh. Look at the curiosity as it goes to the title, right? Well, gardens are kind of nice. Gardens are cool. They can be peaceful. They can be fun. They're pretty. They can be kind of hard work. But one of the main things that you need to understand about a garden, too, is it is an attempt of humans to impose order on the natural world. That's one thing to look at, right? And then, of course, there's the allusion to the Judeo-Christian story of the Garden of Eden, okay? You can read more about that later on. Let's move. All right, so I went to the Garden of Love. All of a sudden, what William Blake did was he took himself out of the poem and he put us in it. When we read it, we say it as I. We don't say William Blake wrote this. We say I went to the Garden of Love. The significance of such a thing cannot be understated, okay? All of a sudden, this poem is about you. It's about me. It's about whoever reads it, okay? So, let's move on. Never is a big deal. Whenever you get any kind of absolutes like that, you really need to keep track of it. What it also does is it denotes a particular before the event and an after the event, which kind of resonates with the whole Garden of Eden thing whenever we talk about the expulsion of Adam and Eve from paradise. All right, so let's check the next one. The chapel, okay? Well, the chapel represents the institution of organized religion, okay? So it's gone from what could be like a spiritual kind of thing that has no rules really to a brick and mortar manifestation of rules, okay? So let's keep going. Playing on the green. This gives us the before part, right? So there was the time in the garden before, and then there's the time in the garden after. All right, so, oh my goodness, we see the gates of the chapel were shut. Well, let's click on that. Why would a church, right, feel the need to be fenced in? What are they keeping out? What are they keeping in? Who are they keeping away, right? What's with the exclusion, right? Okay, so then we get thou shalt not. Does anybody on the planet like to be told what not to do? No. Now, when we think about the idea of the Ten Commandments, which this line specifically evokes, it's not a bad thing. Those are not bad guidelines, right? But you also have to understand that it is an attempt to control society. And that can be seen as a good thing or a bad thing. So, let's look at that one. The flowers. So, before we had rules, right? We had lots of pretty flowers. We had a nice place to play. Okay? So, let's continue. Ooh. So, instead of the flowers, well, now tombstones poke up out of the ground. I don't know about you all, but I see that as kind of foreboding and dismal. I'd rather see flowers than tombstones. That's just me. Okay. And then we get to the idea of the priests and walking their rounds. It almost begins to sound like some sort of scary machine, like you would see the priests in their black robes walking, almost perpetually, like a clock or something. Again, to kind of bring the idea of structure into stuff. They don't just walk when they feel like it, they walk when they're told to walk. They walk on a pattern. Anyway, so here we go. This is a heavy line. You get to talk about the briars. Well, then the briars, especially this weekend is, right? I mean, it's Good Friday today, and I'm out here trying to teach you all about critical analysis, okay? Anyway, briars, thorns, crown of thorns, Christ, okay? The sacrifice, the Lamb of God. And I'll tell you what, if you know anything about being a lamb, then you should know that they are sacrificed, okay? So you got to worry sometimes about that whole shepherd metaphor, but that's a different subject altogether. But again, with the use of the personal pronouns, the I, the me, right, or the my, Blake inserts us into this poem again, and because of the association with Christ, then we are seen as similar to Christ. I know this is kind of heady, and I know that some people might even think it is blasphemous to a degree to compare themselves to Christ, but I mean, no smaller in authority than Jesus himself tells us to live like him. So, whatever. So, if we click down here at this last one, we can kind of try to begin to synthesize all of these different things that William Blake has put in front of us. I am not going to sit here and write an essay for you, but I am bringing you up through the whole process until we would start to figure out what we want to write, what we believe, how we want to express ourselves. And young folks, expressing yourselves eloquently with some sort of intelligence, with some sort of information-based opinion, right? That's how you're going to end up getting good grades on some of these assignments where you have to study something and write about it. So, we'll go back to the slide, please, the slideshow. Yeah, that's fine, kill it. Oh, where'd it go? Pardon the technical errors. Well, anyway, if you go to the end of the slide, children, there's going to be some different resources that you can find to look up more about critical analysis in case you want to hear it from a different voice or read it from a different perspective. And so that's all. You can check it out. Oh, wait, there we go. See? Resources. Go and check that out a little bit. That's the end of this virtual lesson from the literal teacher. Bellman and I were out. Peace and health to you and yours.